I'm going to vlog about the desire for sex and the desire for relationships. A few days ago I was looking at the point of my past experiences of relationships, especially if I look at the earlier relationships that I had, or at least the first relationship that I had that turned out to be an abusive relationship, and how that relationship, interestingly enough, as I was looking at the point a few days ago, how that relationship was the foundation point from which I designed and desired relationships after that. And the reason why this point was interesting to me and why I would like to share it is because I was looking at the point of, especially if one experiences a traumatic experience or an abusive relationship, the question came up, why would one necessarily continue desiring certain relationships and certain type of men or women? And the point that I was specifically looking at, which was very interesting, is that my first relationship that I was in, I met the guy, and because I hadn't been in relationships before, I mean, I was quite young, but at the same time not as young as most people who have their first serious relationship. I mean, I was already about 18, and I met this guy, and I had this idea of what I wanted a relationship to be like. I had this idea of the ideal guy. Now, obviously, each person has, at some point or another, this idea of what they want a partner to be like. And I met this guy, and he was well dressed. He came from a big city where from my perspective, the cool people come from, and he spoke really well, and he had a lot to say, and he was like quite knowledgeable of like system talk, meaning he was in a good job, and he just spoke about all these things which to me was like, all I heard was, wow, this guy has a good job, he's talented, he has certain abilities, he's using them. And to me, that was just like this light went on, like, ooh, this is the guy I want to be with. Because in my mind, like what every person does, is I immediately then, in my mind, quickly equated that to money. This guy will be able to support me. And the guy was quite nice in the beginning, and we started hanging out, and then after a while it was official, we're now boyfriend and girlfriend. And then after about 4 to 6 months, he started changing. He started, one day, I actually remember the day he came into my room. That day I had gone out for lunch with one of my other male friends who I was working with at the time, and he came to the room and he said to me, so when you went out today with your friend for lunch, did you sleep with him? And I was very shocked in that moment, and a warning light went off, wow, something is wrong. And from there on, things just got worse. From that point, it slowly started becoming more and more like mental abuse, emotional abuse. In the end, it turned to, after quite a while, it turned to physical abuse. And I was already at that stage. I was completely dependent on this guy financially. I had such low self-esteem that I was completely dependent on him, especially he was my first boyfriend. I was completely dependent on him for self-validation, for self-acceptance. I didn't even understand that there is, which most people don't even understand the concept or any idea of self-acceptance existing outside the parameters of relationship and friendship. I was just looking for it in another person. And at that point, when the relationship went from mental to emotional to physical abuse, I was already completely trapped in the relationship. I was completely dependent on him financially, as I mentioned, all the points. And therefore, when it came down to the point of I should leave, my mind just screamed, no, you cannot, you'll have to support yourself. And in the end, basically, I chose monetary support and support in the form of words which are, "You beautiful, I love you," all that stuff. I chose that over actually taking care of myself. And I was looking at it the other day of why I'm mentioning this point and I'm discussing this point is because that experience towards the end, I mean, this now, as I said, escalated. So 6 months into the relationship, it was already fully abusive, and I was making excuses and justifications why I shouldn't leave this guy. And in other words, I stayed with this guy for about 5 years, and this entire relationship was abusive. And looking back at it now, why would a person actually want to, when you've come out of it years later, or even let's say you've broken up with that person for a few months, you by yourself, and then you start desiring a relationship again. I was looking at that point, and the point there is that the few moments during sex, for example, where I felt absolutely desired, that one moment, my mind would program that one moment and go, I'm holding on to that. Then let's say that guy can be as abusive as he wants to, but 2 weeks later he will look at me and go, you are the most beautiful woman I've ever met. And my mind, because now I remember when I was looking at it a few days ago, I went and looked at those moments where my mind specifically, and there were thousands of them. You can trace it back in your own relationships. You will find those points for yourself. And I was able to look back at a few of those moments where the mind, it's literally just where the guy would just look at me and go, you're the woman for me. And my mind would go, that's it, and hold that point. Then for 2 months, he would strangle me, he would beat me, he would, all kinds of abusive situations, tell me I'm a piece of shit, that he's going to kill me, he's going to kill my family. And yet, so I would feel so bad within the relationship, and yet, in one moment, he would take me out to dinner and stare at me across the candlelight and say, I've never met a woman like you. Or during sex he would say something to me which would be my trigger point. It would be the point where I would absolutely fall, and all he would say to me is that which I've already decided, if this person says this to me, this is it. And he would just say whatever point it was. For each person will be different, and the mind literally grasps onto that one feeling. Because remember, that person would say it to you, you would have your feeling, you would go into that absolute mental masturbation moment, and you would just be like, oh, this is it, and you would hold on to that moment. So a year later, let's say you've broken up with a guy, 6 months later or a year later, that point would come up again, that if only I could be in a relationship. And I've been through a couple of relationships now, and each one has been basically aspects of myself that I have not effectively directed. I have not let go of father issues, self-acceptance issues. So each relationship, I've only been in about 4, my entire life. However, I'm able to see that in each relationship that I've gone into, it has basically become that which I have not effectively let go of, that which I have not, basically like a resonant pattern playing out, usually from a relationship between me and my father, that is now playing out and attempting to correct itself, and because you are it and you're stuck in that pattern, you're not directing it effectively. Obviously, at Destiny we work with the tools of self-honesty, writing, introspection, self-forgiveness, self-correction, but it's each time you end up in a relationship you see a new point, and then you can write about it and walk through the point and breathe through the point. So every time, though, at the end of one of these relationships, I always look at the points I could mostly at the beginning of the relationship see that if I go into this agreement or this relationship with this person, it's going to end a certain way. I find that usually, because especially if you spend time with a person, or you work with a person, or live with them, you usually can see, if you actually look, that that person has those points they still have to walk through. I have these points I have to walk through, and really in that moment, if you add it together, the equality equations 1 + 1 = 2. You're going to put myself and the other being together. This person's undirected points and my undirected points are going to result in me having to, or that person having to deal with this aspect of me and me having to deal with it. And if both beings are applying themselves, absolutely, yes, obviously, that's the whole point of agreements, you walk through the points. However, if it doesn't work that way in the relationship or the agreement ends, I can get to the end of it and look back and go, why did I, when I saw that these points were going to have to be walked through, but I discarded them? I'm talking about the points where you see that there are aspects of both beings that are not in alignment, meaning the self-honesty hasn't come through for me, for example, and that if I go into agreement with this person, I'm going to fall, or I'm going to allow certain things. Why would I do that? And that's the whole point I was looking at the other day, and it's those specific, energetic, emotional mind experiences. As I said, I traced it back to especially that time when I was in that 5-year abusive relationship. There are specific moments where the mind would literally grab a moment and go, oh, that's so nice. Then it would be chaos for weeks. I mean, I would end up with strangulation marks and, pass out because the person is busy strangling me to death. And 3 days later he says something, or he looks at me a certain way, and the mind goes, oh, that's so nice. And then I would hold that moment. So those are the secret mind, hidden points, which you are, as the mind is holding those points in place. So your next relationship, or the relationship after that, or relationship after that, there's all these points where you felt good even though your relationships were not serving you. They were not in your best interest. There were many in the end abusive points happening. However, because there were those nice moments, those are the moments you hold on to. And that's why I find I keep going back into relationships and back into relationships, because of those singular moments. And the mind, I find, is so fast that if you are faced with the decision of going into an agreement with somebody or into a relationship, the mind will move so fast. It'll just process that information so quickly, where it'll go and feel good, and it'll quickly go and look at all those points, and it'll make a decision. Come on, do it. It'll be nice. And so I wanted to discuss this point with regards to the small moments that one hold on to, and those would be the determining points. And I find, especially with sex and masturbation, during sex there were significant moments where you feel so good. I mean, we all know what it feels like, whether you're having sex or masturbation, or you're watching pornography, or whatever your point is with sex. We all know what our absolute little utopia moment is, whether you're alone in your room, or you're in a nightclub, or you're sleeping around. It doesn't matter. You have your moment where you're absolutely like, this is it. This is bliss for me. And those bliss moments in between the abusive moments was it. I mean, it was getting so abusive where the person would be strangling me while having sex with me, and yet I was having such a energetic rush from the experience of being dominated, being desired, the power play, the feeling helpless, and in that feeling beautiful. And those moments you hold on to, and those moments, even though you end the relationship, you say to yourself, oh, that was bad, I'm not going to do that again, blah, blah, blah. Everybody says they're never going to do that again, but it's those points, while I'm sharing this vlog, but I realize it's those points that are the hidden points that you will play a relationship over and over again, or perhaps even make the same decisions over and over again about who you're going to be in a relationship with,